Aloha and welcome to the Creative Hawaii Podcast, a podcast that interviews creatives in Hawaii, focused on social impact. We're here to bring you stories through youth empowerment and intergenerational connections. Welcome to the very first show of Creative Hawaii. I am your host, Mary Moody. And in this first show, we're just going to go over what you can expect from listening to this podcast. To start things off, I am broadcasting to you from Volcano, Hawaii, on the island of Hawaii, the Moku o Keawe. And we are in the Ahupua'a of Ola'a, and we reside on the flanks of Kilauea. As much as I am trying to keep all of the noise to a minimum in this space, you might hear birds, lots of birds, quite a bit in the background, and that's because Kilauea is home to lots of native endemic birds like the apapane and the iiwi. Birds that are found nowhere else in the world live in the rainforest here at the summit of Kilauea in Ola'a. So I think it's important to establish that I am living on Kanaka Maoli land. I am not a native Hawaiian person myself, and many of us aren't who live here, which is why this podcast is a vehicle to bring Indigenous knowledge to a greater audience. And of course, we don't want to overstep our boundaries with sharing Indigenous knowledge, but we can have a reverence for the places that we are, the indigenous and ancestral places that we are. So I really do encourage everyone to know which ahupua'a you are living in, to understand what it means, and to tell others about it, because we are still living in a very colonized world. And if you don't know where you are, thankfully, there are some incredible Kanaka Maoli organizations and historians just dedicated to helping folks understand their sense of place. And if you'd like to find out some of those resources, you can head over to our website at hawaiilit.org and check out our first blog post called Sense of Place. And there you'll find resources where you can have access to maps and information that we have culled. So head over there and check it out. Okay, so we'll be doing several different things on this show, and one of them is what I would like to call Pass the Mic. And oftentimes in this very individualized, very capitalistic world that we live in, it's pretty commonplace to hog the mic and not pass it on, and not empower our community members and our youth and our kupuna in order to also share the spotlight that we have and the voice and the platform that we have. So on some days, we will be passing the mic to youth storytellers. And so we've got one coming up. I'm super excited about it. I'm going to wait to announce it because it's really exciting. But we found a 16-year-old Kanaka Maoli filmmaker and hooked her up to interview Kiara Lacey, a well-known Kanaka Maoli filmmaker who is an activist and a producer and a director. And we really look forward to having that interview. So that's an example of one of the interviews that we'll be having, asking youth to come on and actually interview mentors and people that they look up to, so they can get that experience and they make those connections and we all get to be happy. Another thing that we'll be doing is bringing kupuna on to talk stories about their lives and what they've learned and who they are and their sense of place and how they've seen the culture impacted by colonization, and also how it is for them to grow up and to grow old in a place where they see is constantly changing and their culture becomes further and further and further away from them. So I talked a lot about Kanaka Maoli, but we are also looking at multi-ethnic perspectives because obviously we are made up of many, many, many ethnicities here in Hawaii. I identify as a Filipina, and my mother's ancestral DNA shows that we are Samoan and Maori and also Indonesian. For my father's side, I'm Haole, so I'm Welsh and English, and that's what makes up who I am. And I originally come from California, and my mother immigrated here from the Philippines, and I'm a first generation born American, which for me is a very interesting experience. But as someone who's not from Hawaii, I come here as pretty much a settler. And that's something I am comfortable with, because if we can recognize our roles as non-Indigenous, non-Native folks to these islands, and that we're using these islands and this economy and the people and the aina and the knowledge and the culture that's here to benefit, whether that be through business or whatever means we are generating abundance, then I believe it's important that we acknowledge that we are visitors to this land. So how I got involved in social impact works, that story starts a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic hit in 2020. As a new 30-year-old, I was going through, first of all, my Saturn return. And for anyone who knows astrology, that's a really heavy time. And I was confronted with realizing that I did not know who I was. And so that took me on a long rabbit hole journey of figuring out that I can't know who I am if I don't know where I come from, and if I don't know who my people are, and if I don't know where they've been and what they've done. So that journey brought me to actually make contact with my mother after years of not talking to her, and to begin the process of uncovering those ancestral bones. So I started talking to her once a week, every week, and have been for the last 2 years. And I recorded these sessions in the beginning. I started interviewing her because our relationship was pretty green, pretty raw. We didn't quite know where this was going to go, if this was going to end in a family feud, or who knew what was going to happen. But my mother had been absent from my life pretty much my whole life. And I never knew why. So there was just a lot of anger associated with my mother, misunderstandings. And so I took it upon myself to go on this journey in order to find out who I am through understanding who my mother is. That took quite a bit of objectivity on my part. And so we started talking every week, and I found out that my mother was actually sex trafficked into the United States by her own mother, which for me was just like a huge mic drop. So that's something that we actually both discovered together. And so through uncovering my mother's story and the layers of her trauma, we both could come to an understanding of who we are together at the same time. Yeah, so at some point I would actually really love to have my mother on this show to talk us through what that process was like for her and what she gained from making those connections. So sometimes we will be doing a show with a historian, maybe even doing some mo'oku'auhau stuff, some genealogy, because Crystal Mizell, the CEO of Hawaii Lit Production Company, she is a genealogist. And so that's actually something you can hire our company is for genealogical services in understanding your mo'oku'auhau. And some days I will just be on here alone and offering folks opportunities to engage with the creative industry in Hawaii, and highlighting opportunities that have become available through film, through writing, through artistry, anything that's going to benefit the creative community in Hawaii to be empowered and to get their stuff and their voice out there. And last but not least, we're just here to have fun. Like, we want this to be really fun, and we are so looking forward to sharing our lives with you and our journeys through creating this social impact company through this podcast. So we look forward to bringing you content every 2 weeks. So please support us. If you really love everything that we're doing, I would personally invite you to please go to our website, www.hawaiilit.org, and in the top right tab of the website, you can support us, and you can make a one-time donation. And if we can find enough listener support for this podcast, then we can increase the frequency of the broadcast. Mahalo for listening, and we look forward to meeting you again here, same time, same place. And until then, aloha and ahuiho.